Hi there, everyone. This is Christopher. I'm one of the trainers here at Zedmed. We're just waiting for everyone to finish turning up there. Welcome along to our lunch. I think it's now our fourth lunch and learn for 2020. This time on the Eclipse system. Just make sure that when you log in, please remember to keep your microphone mute by clicking on the little icon next to it. All right then, so Eclipse in Zedmed. Eclipse is the method used for sending hospital billing and only hospital billing through to Medicare and the health funds at the same time. In this lunch and learn we're doing today, it'll be divided into three sections. The first section will be showing you how to set up your Eclipse site for using your Zedmed site for using Eclipse. The second section will be showing you how to set up patients for Eclipse billing, but also to create invoices and transmit them through to Eclipse. The third section will be showing you how to do the allocation and receipting of Eclipse claims. Just that middle section there, if you're a receptionist, only that middle section there, the setting up the patients and creating invoices for Eclipse, that's the section that will concern you. Generally, the setup of Zedmed and the receipting of Eclipse claims will generally be done by the practice manager or a specifically designated individual at the site. It's not something that's generally done by a number of different people at the one site. So first, setting up Zedmed to be using Eclipse, you need to check a number of things around the system here. One of them is popping over to the right-hand side here. As you can see, we've got the normal Zedmed office here open at the moment. Going to be going along reception management reports, utilities, down to third-party links there. Need to ensure obviously that your Medicare is enabled and also that naturally that you've got your Medicare PKI and certificate installed. Seeing as this is a test system, I'll just click cancel on that, but obviously normally you would click set on that there. Next, if we head back to the management tab there, we can go to practice setup and branches. You'll need to go to each branch of your site that you intend to set up with Eclipse. You'll need to go into each of those. Say, for instance, if we were setting up the Brisbane clinic, you choose that particular branch. Down the bottom of the screen here, select options. And down the bottom left-hand corner of that there, you'll want to mark Eclipse as enabled there. If you've already been billing to Medicare, the sections above that should already be selected as well. Close that there. That's the basics of setting up Eclipse in your system. But obviously part of the main purpose of billing through Eclipse is you'll be billing health funds. So from time to time, you may need to add a new health fund into your system. The way we'll be doing that is we go into the management tab again. We go into the debtors button here. And down to this option here, Eclipse Fund Participants. Now, when we use the Eclipse Fund Participants option there, that will be pulling a report directly from Medicare, listing just those health funds which can do claiming via Eclipse. Because my system is a test system here, I won't actually be able to click on that option there, but we already have one that we've prepared beforehand. Let me just show you the screenshot there. Here's an example of the report, a small fraction of the report that would come up showing the Eclipse Fund participants. Normally it'd be quite a number of pages long. I would say at least maybe 30 pages long. And you'll see the health funds listed down the left-hand side here. It's perfectly normal that the health funds appear there multiple times. This specific report, as I said, comes directly from Medicare and has a variety of different purposes, and you can see all sorts of interesting information on it. You're seeing what sort of services the different health funds offer. But that's not of concern to us right now. What we will care about, if say for instance we're looking down this list and we're wanting to add this one here, this Lesart People Care, we would find that one on the list there and find the brand ID listed next to it. If as you can see with the example above it there, oops, the example above it there, each time the health fare is listed, the brand ID will be the same for the same health fund there. So any of the lines there is the same really. So you can see Lesart People Care Limited, here the brand ID is AGA. So that's just, those are the two details we need there, the name and the brand ID. So we'll jump back into our real Zedmed here. Once again, reception and the management tab there. We're going to go back into the debtors button here. So we click on debtors, go to this top option here, account payers. And here we can either search to try and find whether perhaps that health fund does in fact exist in this site already, or, well, we always have to do a search first anyway. So let's put the start of that particular name in there and click find down the bottom. And there you go. It turns out that this particular health fund is already in the system, or at least something looking like it. Maybe in this case, so we could just say, oh, that option, that one's already there, we don't need to add it again. But potentially, maybe this is just one with a very similar name. So we could say, no, in fact, we wanted to add a different health fund. So we just come down and click on new. So maybe this one was just called, I don't know, Lesser 9, for instance. And maybe the brand ID that we'd found on that Medicare report was LYS, for instance. We need to then come, so we fill out those two details, and we need to fill in the category, which on this page, for this purpose, will be insurance company. And next we need to fill in the default fee type. Now the default fee type, you should have a number of them pre-set up in the system already there. That's a particular fee schedule that this particular health fund will be using. Now there's not normally a different fee schedule for each health fund. Some of them, like Bupa, has its own fee schedule, its own list of fees. But many other health funds, for instance, use AHSA or some of the other ones. They all link into different things there. So normally you will only have maybe 10 to 12 different fee types, different health fund fee types in your system. Obviously you can see there's some others there like DVA, which are not relevant right now. But you may have hundreds of different health funds and only a few different fee types. So in this particular case with Listen 9, we'll mark the fee type there as AHSA. This is just to ensure that if somebody's billing with Listen 9, they get the right payment, the right cost there on their items. So when we're setting them up for Eclipse, you only need to fill in this top section here. You're welcome to fill in the other sections if you like, but only this top section here. So remember the name, the brand ID, the category being insurance company, and the default fee type. So we Go ahead and close that there. And next, we want to make sure that the individual doctors are also set up to bill through that new health fund we've added in. So again, through the management tab there, down to practice setup, down to doctors, and find treating doctor. So let's see, what doctors do we have here? Dr. Costanza. Let's bring up this doctor. Here we go, I've brought up Dr. Costanza here. So the important thing you want to check here is you go down to the bottom of the screen here to where it says Eclipse Fund Schemes. So if we select on that option there, you'll see on this page a list of the different health funds this doctor has been set up to bill through Eclipse. If there's not one of the lines here, obviously you'd need to add the line, like for that listen 9 we just put in just now. You would need to add a new line for listen 9 there. You can come down here, click add new. So you pick the particular brand name. Obviously there'll be heaps of them there. If we go down far enough on the list, there we go, there's the listen 9 we just added. But then you will also have to put in the payee ID and the claim type. Now the payee ID and the claim type, the best way to put that depends on how that particular doctor has been registered with that health fund. So often the payee ID will be the doctor's provider number, but depending on the particular health fund, it might not be. So the best thing to do is to contact the particular health fund and find out how that doctor has been registered at that particular health fund. You also need to set the claim type. You can find out from that health fund as well whether the doctor has been set up as part of an agreement or as part of a scheme. Scheme, and then maybe there's the particular number in there that's been set up. So we can do add new, close that there, let's cancel it. And so then normally, if this wasn't a test system, it would just appear on this list as well here, showing the brand name, fund ID, and so on. So if the health fund is not on this list, the doctor won't be able to properly claim through that particular health fund through Eclipse. You can close that screen there. Also, if this particular doctor is a locum, you can go to the employment records section down here, select new, click on the locum and the particular doctor that they're being a locum for there. In that particular case, you'll still be able to do an Eclipse claim for them as a locum doctor, but it will use the provider details of the doctor they're being the locum for, and it will send, and the money will go through to that specific doctor. So that's the doctor section there. So the next section is setting up a patient for using Eclipse. And this section is where the receptionists could rejoin us perhaps. So if we go to reception and patients, let's look up a patient. Maybe we'll go into this particular account here. No, I'll go into a relative. Let's go into this account here. Okay, so this is the sort of thing that receptionists can set up when they're first attending the patient, or just when they've first got the details for the patient. So on the right-hand side here is the payers section. You might be familiar with the payers section, because normally if you're setting up patients for bulk billing, you'd be going into add, setting them up with Medicare there. And in fact, if you've done billing in the past where you were billing to the health funds, but you were manually posting off the invoices to the health funds in the past, you would have gone into this section and you've added in third-party options in there as well. However, in this case, when we're sending through Eclipse, you set it up with the patient themselves as the account payer. So let's select that one there. We've got patient selected. See, we've said add patients into the payer section. There's the patient name there. Remember, you may have multiple payers there. You might have family members there. You might have Medicare, all sorts of things. But the important thing in this case for Eclipse billing is that we've got the patient's name there. Then after you've got the patient's name in there, what you also need to do is click on the details button below it here. When we click on that one there, we come to this Eclipse section. And you see we can put in the fund/brand. What I might do on this list here, I might go down to, and there's listen 9, but we won't pick that one this time. Let's pick Medibank Private this time. And put in their membership number and a UPI if they've got that at the end of their membership number, and then click close on that there. You see now when we have the payer selected on the right-hand side here, the patient is the payer, it'll have this extra fund line that's visible there, showing that their particular health fund and their health fund number there. This is a quick and easy way you can see whether this patient, a particular patient, has been set up to use Eclipse. Is to set the payer as their name on this slide here and see whether it's got the health fund underneath it there. Often you can just tell at a glance there. So what we'll be doing now is doing some invoicing through Eclipse. So unlike with normal face-to-face billing, Eclipse billing will often not be through the waiting room. You'll usually be using bill up the top of a particular patient's screen here. So let's click on bill there. The card's expired. Well, test information, we can't do much with that. So up at the top here, remember again, we need to make sure on this invoice creation screen that the payer is not set to Medicare and not set to the health fund. The payer needs to be set to the patient's name. We can see if we've set it up properly, because on the right-hand side here, while we've got the correct payer there, it'll show their fund details. Pick the particular doctor that's relevant to them, any referral. We'll come down here, put in the particular date the service occurred. In the item, let's put in 0104. I'm going to tab across. There we go. Now here's one of the crucial things. We've always got to check to see what the fee is there. Now often by default, potentially sometimes this person might be paying privately, sometimes they might be paying with a charge through Eclipse. So in this particular case, it's got P1 there. It might have other numbers listed there as the default instead. So P1, as we'll see if we click on this fee, means that it's the private fee for Dr. Costanza. Usually, if you're claiming through Eclipse, that's not what you'll be billing. I'll show you a different way in a moment, but usually you want to come down here and say, oh, actually we need to claim it. We're on Medibank Private, so we want to claim at the particular fee level for Medibank Private. To double check which one that is, we can look along this line here and see fee fund type MPL. So we need to ensure that this fee here, you see how this is 200 at the moment. If we go down here on the list, fee fund types, let's see, Medibank Private. Now that's reduced to the Medibank Private rate there. So Medibank Private, yeah. And then an extra thing that we always must remember to do before we add that one in is come down here and click on properties. The important thing when you're billing hospital billing, which is what Eclipse billing is, of course, is to come to this section of the properties one there and specify which the particular hospital is that we're going to be claiming through. Let's put in Andrews there, for instance, and OK there. And you'll see because we've selected one there, it's now displaying in the notes on the side there. So that's the three most important things for the creation of an Eclipse invoice. Make sure you've got the right payer, as in the person who's connected to their particular account. So the right payer. The second thing was checking the fee type there. So obviously, if you send it through way too much money, they'll only pay a portion, as in a price that's too high. They'll only pay a portion of it, and you'll have to adjust your books afterwards. And then set the hospital there, which was through the properties section there. Once we've got all of those there, we can come down the bottom here and select Eclipse. That's test system stuff. Yeah. Okay, so that's wanting us to set, excuse me just a moment. Let's just jump out of that there. I changed the date. Oh yes, we didn't have the date of birth set. 1st of the 1st, 1980. That should be good for us there. I almost feel like I should turn it over to you guys now to just make sure you remember what I was showing you on the screen just before. But just to recap, the three most important things there: the payer. Obviously, you've got to set the doctor. So the payer, when we're putting the item in, the fee type, make sure that if we're just charging, that we're not charging a gap. So we would leave it as fee 1, P1, or the particular doctor's fee if we were charging a gap. But seeing as we're not charging a gap, we're just sending it straight through to Eclipse. We check what the fund fee type is over there. Head down on the list, Medibank Private. Almost missed it. The notes on the right-hand side there, you see it doesn't have the name of the hospital there, so let's go into Properties. Check the hospital, and let's pick a different one this time, Angaston. Excellent. There they are there. Let's see, now that the person's considerably older, we'll put them through. Yep, continue. Yes, continue to Eclipse. You see the page here. This is, normally you won't get so many errors as I did there, but like I say, seeing it's the test system. This is the Eclipse transmission screen. We're going to send this, it's unlike Medicare bulk billing, you're not going to be doing batching and sending it through. We're going to be sending this claim right through to Eclipse now. First thing you want to check is up here where it says claim type, where it says agreement, schemes, and IMC patient claims. It should always say the agreement be set to either agreements or schemes. If you see it set to IMC patient claims, that means that you skipped the step earlier, and this particular health fund, so in this case Medibank Private, the doctor hasn't been set up to be using that particular health fund. So usually, if you did leave it set to IMC patient claims, rather if you transmitted it as IMC patient claims, that would be the particular situation where they send the check to the patient for the doctor. So you really, what you want to do, if you come to this screen here and realize by the fact that it's ticked IMC patient claims there, you want to exit out of this and go back and set up the doctor correctly. However, normally you'll come into the screen and like we've got set up here, you'll see it saying either agreements or schemes there. These two sections, normally you don't need to fill in. This one's just default. This one in the middle is there's some very specific circumstances, medical circumstances where you need to fill this middle section in here. So normally you can just come down the left-hand side here, set to agreements, that's fine. It may supply some error messages down the bottom here, like it's saying at the moment, because it's a test system. Normally it will say ready to send, and you can just click on send there, and that will get transmitted through to Eclipse. And that's, for as far as receptionists are concerned, as much as they need to do at that stage. What I'll do is I'll recap that section just then and show you what it would be like if there was an extra, if the doctor was charging an extra gap on top of the Eclipse there. So let's close, cancel out of this. So I'll say No, we don't want to print it. So we're going to be billing another invoice to Jane here. Yeah, of course it's expired. Here you go. So remember again, those three things. The payer has to be set to the patient's name. The health fund on the side there. The doctor. In the 104 there again. And you see for this particular one, thing is it already knows she's in Anguston Hospital. It's defaulted to that already. You could go into properties and change it over if she had changed to a different hospital. In this particular case, out of those three things, remember, check the fee is the one there. So there may be some situations when the doctor is charging an extra gap on top of the health funds that you would leave that fee still set to the doctor's private health fee there. So in this particular case, if we want to know how much the gap is, we can come up to the middle section here where it says refund gap calculation. So at the moment, it's calculating the gap as if we were the difference between the doctor's private value and what we get back from Medicare. But in this particular case, seeing as we're sending it through to Eclipse, may as well click it on fund there. So we can see in this particular case, the doctor's charging $200 for this service. The estimated refund from the health fund is $114. So that leaves us with a gap of $85 there. So in this particular case, think if we've got a gap, we jump into quick pay in the bottom right here. We come over here and we'd press, click on gap there. We're just wanting to pay the gap. Let's pay it as cash perhaps there. We'd add that one in there. And then we'd come down and press Eclipse there now that we've added that money on there. We come down here and click Eclipse. Once again, that takes us to the transmission screen here as well. And we would just transmit it through there. We can't transmit it from my test system, but I think you get the picture. So that's as much as the receptionists will need to do. So no, I don't want to print one. Rewind out of that there. As far as the administrator or practice manager is concerned, they will need to be jumping into the Zedmed, usually probably about once a week, to receipt of any health fund deposits that have come through the Eclipse system. Now, seeing the health funds still take a bit of a while to process these claims, generally they can easily take 2 weeks at a time to process some of the claims, or longer potentially. So generally, even though you can do it as frequently or as infrequently as you want, our recommendation and the standard is once a week. So what you will do, there, perhaps once a week, the practice manager or whoever will come into management here, come into the batching tab on the top left here, and down to ERA inquiry here. Now, by default, so I understand there's lots of words here. By default, down the bottom here, Zedmed will attempt to be helpful and will pick the particular date range that it thinks you're going to ask it about next. You can obviously change that date range, but by default, it'll show you the last date you ran it, plus 7 days, because it assumes you're going to log in once a week. You can pick whichever date range you want here, but with the exemption that Medicare doesn't allow us to report on a date range that's longer than 31 days. It's just a restriction they put on us. So one of my recommendations is, no matter how frequently you run this, I wouldn't recommend that you run the date range for the current day. So I'd recommend that you might run it for up until yesterday. So perhaps up until, if today's the 12th, we'd run it up till the 11th inclusive. That's because if we ran it for the 12th today, we could run it at, say, 1:30 in the afternoon. And when we run this report, it wouldn't contain any of the payments that had come down later in the day. If we run it for a previous day, say the 11th, it would include everything that had come down on that day. The important reason to run this particular report here is if we run it with this particular ready status on the right-hand side here, that will pull into Zedmed any new claims that have been paid within that date range. We can't run it for the same days multiple times with that ready status there, because once something's been pulled down into Zedmed, it's staying in Z. It doesn't need to be pulled down again. So if we run it multiple times, the other times it'll show nothing there. So generally once a week, you'll come in here, you'll set the particular date range if you need to, up until yesterday maximum, as I say, is my recommendation. And you'll process it as ready there and click OK. Now, this particular section again is another one of these sections that I can't actually show you in my test system because we don't have live data. But again, we've got some examples that I prepared ahead of time. So as you see here, this is a mock example from Medicare of one of those Eclipse remittance advice. So this is how the claims look when we're pulling them via that report into Zedmed. So you see there's a couple of different claims here for the illustrious Dr. and Death Be Chocolate. And yeah, so we'll see that one there. If we had already run it for the same day, so if we saw this particular report and then we came back and ran that same Eclipse report with exactly the same settings again, it wouldn't return anything because it had already pulled those claims down into Zedmed. So after we've brought that particular report down there and clicked, usually people like to print that, but you do get a chance later on to print it off again. Actually, I'll say now, if you do forget to print it off there and you wanted to come back to this screen to print it off again, you will have noticed that I said you can't run the report again with ready set there, but if you do change it over to reported will show claims that are not new as well. That'll show previous claims that you pulled down into Zedmed. So you can repeat the same date range there. If you wanted to print it off, that will show the same thing again and again. But the very first time you run this screen, you have to do it as ready for the particular date range. So we come back here. So after we've had a quick look at that screen there and clicked OK, Zedmed will present us with this extremely wordy screen here. Basically, what this screen is saying is it's noticed that some deposits have been made against some of the claims. Do we want to pull those deposits, display those deposits in Zedmed? And it's offering, right now, it's offering to automatically receipt and allocate those claims, those deposits against the appropriate claims in Zedmed. Now, you only get one chance for each date range to do this one. So it's strongly recommend that you click on yes when you get to this screen. It's not the end of the world if you click on yes and you decide you need to, that for whatever reason you need to cancel out of that later on, you can undo that there. But if you just click on no because you're not sure what's going on or whatever, you find there's quite a bit of a longer procedure if you click on no, if you're going in and receipting everything and allocating everything manually. So always our strong recommendation is click on yes from this screen here, and it will automatically allocate and receipt all of those amounts. So next, we just pop back into, oh yeah, there we go. And that's what the screen will look like there. When we click yes, it'll say it's automatically receipted off all of those invoices that we've seen, and it's automatically allocated the payments. So I'll just jump back into Zedmed here, the real Zedmed. So this takes us, for us to actually see the individual claims and what's happening with them. So remember, once a week we do the EIR inquiry to pull them down into Zedmed. We can come into the Eclipse claim store here, which is a little bit like the claim stores that you might have been using for your Medicare. Come into the claim store here. Seeing as this is an entirely Zedmed screen, you can set that date range back as far as you want it. Obviously, it'll show lots of claims here. And pick generally these three different claims, these three different status options in the middle here. So when you first lodged claims, they'll all appear as lodged there. And presuming they get processed correctly, they'll move through these three statuses till inevitably they wind up in IMC ERA reported there, where they actually get when they've been processed by Eclipse. So normally what you would expect to see after we'd automatically claimed and received all of these is a screen that looks a little bit like this. Now you'll have to excuse us to mock this up. I took an example from a live site, but I've blanked out all the identifying details there. You can see all of these, because normally all of the names would be down here. I've got an example name that I've put in there. See the deposit amounts down the right-hand side there. Most of these have got no outstanding amounts on them there. And those ones with no outstanding amounts have been received have got the green ticks on them there. I'll be coming back to that particular troublesome case in the middle there in just a moment. So you notice for each of these options here, either individually or as a group, you can come down to this button down here, the Eclipse button, where you've got IMC process status and IMC process report. These are very similar to the two reports that you run in the Medicare batching section. The IMC process status will give a single line, for at least a single line for each claim, mainly just showing whether the claim is currently being processed or whether it's been rejected or whether it's been accepted. You will always need, for a particular claim, and you can run run this report for multiple of these at the same time, but it won't unlock the IMC process report for any of these claims until you've run the IMC process status for it first. We jump back into the actual Zedmed. You'll often find, as you go through these three middle stages here, that you'll run the process status on items under the lodge status there, and in doing so, that'll move them down to the next status here, where you can check their particular conditions using, remember Eclipse there, using the IMC process report. So you'll use those two options. Use those two options there to check what's going on with any particular troublesome claims. Now, from time to time, you might find that some of the claims have failed, they've been rejected for one reason or another, and you need to resubmit them. Then in that particular case, you wouldn't do it with any of these, but then in that particular case, you'd come up here and you could click Set Status to Cancelled. Now, a problem a lot of sites we've encountered have with this is they assume this is like same-day delete for the Medicare claims. This isn't. This only sets the status to cancelled inside Zedmed. So resets that particular claim and invoice in Zedmed. You should never do this particular option here unless you already know that Eclipse is completely finished, usually completely rejected that particular claim. Otherwise, if you do this option without when the particular claim is still being processed through Eclipse, you'll end up with a confusing situation where Zedmed will think that that claim is dead in the water, but Eclipse is still processing the claim and may even wind up paying it. So if you have just submitted a particular claim and you realize that, you need to remove it for whatever reason, your main two options are either letting it through and having it fail, or getting in contact directly with Medicare and Eclipse to get them to cancel out the claim. So you always need to do that first before setting a particular status to cancelled. Once you've cancelled a particular claim, from here, it will move into that top status. So you see there's a cancelled status back here. And you can go back into the patient's account inquiry section and resubmit it to Eclipse through there. Normally though, on this screen here, hopefully you'll be using the automatic section that comes up after running the ready report, so it should all be taken care and hopefully they'll all be paid off there. But say there might be some circumstances there, like this particular case with Frank Smith here, where clearly the amount we wanted was much higher than the health fund was going to pay us. So they're 327 less that they didn't pay us. So in this particular case, what we could do, there's a little button that's hidden there, but you can see it down here, adjust and receipt. So if we click that adjust and receipt option there, we'd get through to exactly the same account invoice adjustment section in the patient's account inquiry that we would see if we'd gone through the patient's account inquiry section. So you see in this particular case, because and this was a live case as well, because we automatically receipted off the particular claim, the way the automatic receipting works is it applies the money instead of a little bit to each particular service. It puts as much as it can on the first service, then as much as it can on the second service, and you see in this particular case, it obviously ran out of money during that second service there. And then the last one's not paid at all there. So this sort of situation might occur. Let's just go back to that previous screen there. This sort of situation might occur where perhaps you forgot to check the fee type when you were constructing the invoice, and perhaps you accidentally transmitted the invoice through using a fee type of the doctor's private fee, so like P1 for instance, when you meant to send it through at the health fund rate of Medibank, for instance. So normally what you would do, you could come into the patient file here, and normally it's not particularly, so maybe what the health fund really did was pay just a little bit for each of those across it. But seeing as all if you're just trying to reduce it to the rate, so get rid of this outstanding amounts that you're looking for here, you would come into these ones here and you would use your normal account inquiry tools to adjust the outstanding amount here. I'll quickly, even though we covered that in a previous Lunch and Learn session, I'll briefly just jump you back into that account inquiry section. We'll look into, say, for instance, friend Paul Hogan here, account inquiry. Remember, this is just the Eclipse claim. You'll go straight into this section from the adjust and receipt section under the Eclipse claim. It will look exactly the same as if we'd come in here and we'd done adjustment. So here you see that particular invoice. We could move to particular services. Maybe there's some services that the health fund didn't want to pay at all. We can void them out, or we can discount them to the rate they paid. So we can say for instance, they only paid $50 on this one. we could reduce it by, what's that, 64.15 to be down in line. So when we reduced that one there, if we reduced, so we could reduce these particular service items here by $94, 156 here. Once we've done that, they would get the green ticks there. And on the previous page here, now that would show the green tick there as well. So remember again that there's lots you can do by going through the IMC process status and the IMC process report to get the details about why the claims may have been stopped and at which particular level. Let's see. Okay, so just one extra little bit about the claims there. I understand some people may be claiming assistant doctor's fees through the invoices there. When you're doing it through Eclipse, you do need to do your assistant doctor's fees on separate invoices instead of combining them into the same invoice. You need to do the same one there. So, good to stay on top of the Eclipse claiming. Remember, you want to come into that section, the batching section there, run ERR inquiry probably once a week. I wouldn't really advise less than that, and sites that do it a lot more than that, that's probably not required either, but just don't run it for the current day as well. So, I think we've pretty much come to the end of the session there today. If we move along, yep, where are we here? Here we are. Yep, this one's there. So I've got a little quiz for you here that you can just do at home there. I'll leave that up on the screen for a few moments before going through it momentarily. So have a bit of a read of that and see whether you can jot down some answers on your piece of paper or whatever. And then I'll come back in just a moment to answer those questions. Okay, that's probably enough time for you at least to have a quick little look at those questions. So remember, which three things must I check when creating an Eclipse invoice? Just jump back into the section here and pull up patient. The three things that you want to check when doing an Eclipse invoice is making sure that you've got the patient's name up the top here. That's the particular, they're set up using the particular account there. That when, after you put the item in here, make sure that you've got the correct fee there. So it should either be the doctor's private fee, or more usually it'll be the particular fee fund type for the particular health fund they're using. So Medibank Private down there. And well, this patient's already been set up there, but usually you want to click on properties there and set the particular hospital they're using there as well. Those are the three things there. We did get a question on the way in, thanks for that, Fiona, about this refund gap calculation. By default, it will always be set to Medicare there. So if you're wanting it just to calculate the rate based on the health fund, you'd want to click on fund there. So usually it won't be so important in the case of Eclipse, but if you did have a gap because you're paying at the doctor's private rate there, you would definitely want to set that to fund so it would show the gap amount there. And then you would be transmitting that through there. The next question was, what should I check on the Eclipse transmission screen? Let's go to the Eclipse transmission. Yeah. So remember, you want to check within this top section here with these three options. You want to check that this has come up saying agreements or schemes. Remember, if it's come up saying patient claims, that means you haven't got the doctor set up for this particular health fund. How do I cancel an incorrect Eclipse invoice I just transmitted? Let's say, go back a couple of here. So how do you cancel it? Remember, as much as you might be tempted to go for that set status to cancel there, that's not going to do what you want. If it's just been sent through, your options are to either let it go through and fail or to contact Medicare and Eclipse directly. We can't cancel an Eclipse claim from our end. This particular option here only cancels it inside Zedmed. You should only use that option there if it's already been cancelled out of Medicare. So, is it safe to automatically receive receipt from the ERO report? Definitely. You can, if we come back to that section there, no, actually it's a screenshot, wasn't it? Never mind. That was that section there. So yes, it's definitely safe to click yes there. If you decide down the track that you need to remove that receipt, it's very easy to go into the system and remove that particular receipt that put into the system. And the last option here, as somebody asked me the other day, how do we know if my Bupa fees are up to date? Now, it was a bit of a trick question because we didn't actually cover it in the session today, but it's quite relevant to the session. So remember, once a month, you should be having one of your members of staff log on to the Zedmed website and check to see whether there's any new fee schedules that need to be loaded into your Zedmed. If you look up on the Zedmed website at the moment, we've already got a previous lunch and learn specifically for checking that your fees are up to date and ensuring that your fees are up to date. It doesn't automatically happen. You will need to have somebody, potentially one of your designated members of staff, potentially a number of sites get their IT to do it, but you are responsible for making sure that those are up to date there. So I hope you got most of those correct there. One thing we want to recommend here, just a moment. Okay, just 2 moments. Sorry, we're just checking whether there's any more questions there. We've got a new feature up on our Zedmed website now. Up on the top right there, we've got a feature request section. So you should have received an email by now, which would give you the password to log into that. You'll be able to log into the feature request section and list any new features you want to see added into future versions of Zedmed. So looks, yep, that's about it for now. So just a reminder that you need to register for any future Lunch and Learn webinars. You can go on our website for all those details there. As I mentioned with the items and fees, We've got a variety of our previous videos up online. Do check them out there, quite useful. And send any feedback back to our implementation email address down the bottom there. Maybe we've got a variety of different ways that you can receive support from Zedmed. We've got quite an expansive website that you can log into there with the client login. There's also our knowledge base under the help button on the Zedmed website as well, which you probably see on this previous page here, the help button there. There's our support desk, Monday to Friday there, and the after-hours support there just for urgent inquiries. And there's our contact details, just back in the bottom right corner of the screen there. Thank you very much for sharing your lunchtime with us today, and I hope to chat to you more down the track. Have a great day.